My daughter sold their house and gave $500,000 for my son-in-law to spend. Then they came to live in my house. I answered, "No." My son-in-law slapped me across the face. That very same day I called my lawyer. When they received the subpoena, before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Tina Watson from Chicago. Thank you for being part of our family. No. Let me tell you everything. My name is Martha, and at 68 I thought I knew my daughter. I thought I understood the woman I raised, the girl I gave everything for. But that Wednesday afternoon in September changed everything I believed about trust, family, and the child I brought into this world. I was in my kitchen making fresh bread when I heard the car doors slam in my driveway. The sound was familiar, Sarah's minivan, but something felt wrong. There was a heaviness in the air. A tension I could feel even through my kitchen window. When I looked outside at my quiet ranch home, I saw my daughter, standing in my front yard with her husband, Marcus. But they weren't carrying the usual gifts they brought during visits. Marcus had 3 packed suitcases beside him, and Sarah was pulling boxes from the back of their van. "Mom," Sarah called out, her voice shaking. "We really need to talk." I wiped flour from my hands on my apron, watching their faces carefully. Sarah looked exhausted, her normally bright smile nowhere to be found. Her clothes were wrinkled, and she kept glancing nervously at Marcus. Marcus, however, stood tall in his expensive jacket, his dark hair perfectly styled despite what looked like a stressful morning. "What's happening?" I asked, opening my front door wide. "Is everyone okay?" They walked inside, their footsteps heavy on my tile floors. I watched as Marcus's eyes moved around my living room, studying my furniture, my photos, as if he was measuring something. "Mom, we need to sit down," Sarah began, settling onto my couch, the same spot where she used to do homework as a teenager. I made us coffee from my old coffee maker. My hands steady even though my heart was starting to race. "Tell me what's going on," I said. Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded slowly. "We sold the house, Mom." The words hit me like cold water. I carefully set my coffee mug on the table, the ceramic making a tiny sound against the wood. "You sold which house?" I asked, though my stomach already knew the answer. "Our house," she whispered. "The blue one on Cedar Avenue. The beautiful ranch house I had helped them buy. The house where I'd given them $35,000 from my savings account for repairs and improvements. The house where I'd spent weekends helping Sarah paint the nursery, hoping for grandchildren that never came. You sold it." My voice sounded small and far away. "Why didn't you discuss this with me first?" Marcus spoke for the first time since entering my home. "We don't need anyone's permission, Martha. It was our house." His voice was cold, matter-of-fact. But there was something else there, something that made my skin feel cold. "I know it was your house," I said slowly. "But Sarah, we talked about your plans for the future. You said you loved that neighborhood. You wanted to raise children there someday." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "Plans change, Mom. How much did you get for it?" "Yes. $500,000. Marcus answered quickly, before Sarah could speak. There was pride in his voice, like he was sharing wonderful news. My heart stopped. $500,000. That was more money than I'd ever seen in my entire life. "That's amazing," I managed to say. "So where are you moving? Did you find a better place? Maybe something with more space for the family you want?" The quiet that followed felt dangerous. Sarah stared at her hands. Marcus examined his expensive watch. "Actually, Mom," Sarah finally said, "we were hoping we could stay here with you, just for a while until we find something new." I blinked hard, sure I'd heard wrong. "Stay here? It would only be temporary," she said quickly. "Maybe a month or 2. We wouldn't cause any trouble." "But what happened to the money from selling the house?" "Yes." Another silence. This one felt heavier, more scary. "Well," Marcus said, straightening his tie, "I had some business opportunities to take care of." Some investments I needed to handle. What kind of investments? Yes. Business things, he said, his tone telling me the conversation should end. But I wasn't ready to stop asking questions. Marcus, you just sold a house for $500,000. What could possibly require all of that money? I bought some equipment for my projects, he said with a shrug. And I paid for some courses to improve my skills. I also took a trip to Vegas with my friends. Oh, and I bought a new motorcycle. I stared at him, waiting for more explanation. When none came, I felt something cold settle in my chest. How much did the motorcycle cost? I asked quietly. Does it matter? Marcus snapped. It was my money to spend. Your money. The words came out before I could stop them. Sarah finally looked up at me. Mom, please. We just need a place to stay while we figure out our next step. Figure out your next step. I repeated. Sarah, you just had $500,000. How are you not able to figure out your next step? It's complicated, she mumbled. I looked between my daughter and her husband, seeing them clearly for maybe the first time ever. Sarah, my sweet girl who I'd raised to be smart and careful, was sitting in my living room homeless despite having just received more money than most people earn in 10 years. And Marcus, who had never worked a steady job since marrying my daughter, was sitting there in expensive clothes that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. Where did all the money go, Marcus? I asked again, my voice stronger this time. He rolled his eyes. I told you I had business to take care of. $500,000 worth of business. It's not your concern, Martha. Something broke inside me. It became my concern when you showed up at my door asking for housing. Sarah put her face in her hands. Mom, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. More difficult than it needs to be. I stood up, my coffee growing cold. Sarah, help me understand this. You had a beautiful house, more money than I've ever seen. And now you're asking to move in with your 68-year-old mother because your husband spent it all on motorcycles and trips to Vegas. It wasn't just motorcycles and Vegas trips, Marcus said defensively. I had debts that needed paying. What debts? Business debts. How much? He glared at me. That's personal information. I felt like the room was spinning. Sarah, I looked at my daughter directly. My daughter lifted her head and I saw something in her eyes that broke my heart. She looked scared, embarrassed, but also hopeless, like she'd stopped fighting a long time ago. How much debt did he have? Asked her directly. Mom, please don't. How much, Sarah? She took a deep breath. About $60,000. $60,000 in business debts that I didn't know about. What kind of business creates $60,000 in debt? She said quietly. Gambling, mostly online poker and some sports betting before we got married. And the rest of the money? Sarah looked at Marcus, who was now staring at his phone as if this conversation wasn't important. He wanted to start a food truck business, she said. And he bought new furniture for his brother's apartment. And he wanted to help his friends with their rent for a few months. What friends? College friends, Marcus said without looking up from his phone. They needed help getting back on their feet. How much help? $200,000. The number felt like a physical punch. $200,000 given to friends by a man who had never earned steady money, never shown interest in anything beyond playing video games and hanging out at bars. So let me understand this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You sold your house for $500,000. $60,000 went to pay off Marcus's gambling debts. $200,000 went to help his friends with rent. What happened to the rest? I told you, Marcus said, finally looking up from his phone with annoyance. I had business expenses. The motorcycle, the food truck supplies, some furniture, gifts for my family. Money goes fast when you're investing in your future. I did quick math in my head. Even being generous with his expenses, there should have been at least $100,000 left, maybe more. Where's the rest of the money? Yes. There is no rest, Marcus said. It's gone. Over $500,000 gone in a few months on motorcycles, gambling debts, gifts for friends, and a food truck business that I was willing to bet would never serve a single customer. I sank back into my chair, feeling every one of my 68 years settling into my bones. This wasn't just about money. This was about the daughter I'd raised, the values I'd tried to teach her, and the man who had somehow convinced her to throw it all away. So now you want to live here, I said. Just temporarily, Sarah repeated. I looked around my small home. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny living room. I'd worked for 40 years to pay off this house, to have a place that was mine, where I could enjoy my retirement in peace. And what's your plan? Yes. How do you plan to get back on your feet? Sarah and Marcus looked at each other. Well, Marcus said, Sarah will keep working at the bank, obviously, and I'm sure the food truck will start making money soon. And if it doesn't, he shrugged, then we'll figure something else out. I stared at this man who had convinced my daughter to sell her house and spend over $500,000 in a few months, and who was now sitting in my living room with the casual confidence of someone who expected to be taken care of. No, I said quietly. What? Sarah looked up sharply. Said no. You cannot stay here. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The word no hung in the air between us like challenge. I watched my daughter's face crumble, but it was Marcus's reaction that truly frightened me. His relaxed mask slipped for just a moment, showing something angry and mean underneath. Mom, you can't be serious, Sarah said, her voice getting louder. We're family. Yes, we are family, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Which is why I'm not going to help you continue this madness. Marcus set his phone down on my coffee table with force. Help us continue what madness, Martha? My daughter made a smart business decision. Not every investment works out right away. Smart business decision. I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. Spending $500,000 on motorcycles, gambling debts, and gifts for friends is not a smart business decision, Marcus. It's throwing money away. How dare you judge how I spend my money? He snapped, his calm face finally breaking. It wasn't your money, I said quietly. It was equity in a house that my daughter worked for, that I helped improve with my own savings. Sarah stood up quickly, walking to my front window. Mom, we wouldn't ask if we had anywhere else to go. What about Marcus's family? Surely his parents could help. His parents live in a tiny apartment, Sarah said. And his brother doesn't have extra space. The brother whose apartment he spent thousands furnishing with new furniture. Marcus's eyes flashed with anger. My personal relationships are none of your business. I stood up, my patience finally gone. They became my business the moment you showed up at my door asking for help. You destroyed my daughter's future on gambling and gifts for friends. And now you expect me to fix the mess you made. It's not a mess, Marcus shouted, jumping to his feet. You wouldn't understand. You've lived in this tiny house your whole life, never taking risks, never trying to build something bigger. You don't know what it's like to have vision. The insult hit hard, but I refused to show it. No, Marcus. I don't know what it's like to gamble away other people's money and then expect them to house me when I lose everything. Sarah turned from the window, her face red. Mom, please. I know Marcus made some mistakes. Some mistakes. I interrupted. Sarah, he spent over $500,000 in a few months. This isn't a mistake. This is a pattern of reckless behavior. You don't know anything about our marriage, Marcus hissed. You don't know what it's like to be married to someone who never wants to take chances on anything. I know what it's like to live within my means, I replied. I know what it's like to save for the things I want instead of expecting others to pay for them when my gambles don't work out. Marcus's face twisted with rage. Well, aren't you just perfect, Martha? The perfect mother who raised the perfect daughter who married the wrong man. I never said that. You didn't have to. It's written all over your face every time you look at me. The truth was, he was partially right. I had never liked Marcus from the moment Sarah brought him home 4 years ago. But it wasn't because of his background or his appearance. It was because of moments like this, when his mask slipped and revealed the selfish, irresponsible person underneath. Marcus, I said carefully, I don't dislike you because of who you are. I dislike the choices you make and how they hurt my daughter. Your daughter is a grown woman who makes her own choices, he shot back. Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you make all the choices and she just pays for them. Sarah finally spoke up, her voice strained. Mom, that's not fair. Isn't it? Turn to her. Tell me, Sarah, whose idea was it to sell the house? She hesitated. We discussed it together. Whose idea was it to give $200,000 to Marcus's friends? Another hesitation. Marcus thought they really needed help. Whose idea was it to spend money on gambling debts that you didn't even know existed until after you were married? Sarah's face turned red. Mom, please. Answer the question, Sarah. Who's been making the financial decisions in your marriage? We make them together, she said weakly. Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off my living room walls. Oh, please, Sarah, tell your mother the truth. Tell her how lucky you were that someone like me wanted to marry you. Tell her how grateful you were that someone with big dreams would choose someone so ordinary. I felt my blood turn cold. Someone so ordinary. Yes, Marcus said, his voice full of poison. Someone with vision. Someone who thinks big. Someone who could have had any woman he wanted. Your daughter knows she got lucky when I chose her. I looked at Sarah, waiting for her to defend herself, to show some strength. Instead, she stared at the floor, her shoulders shaking like she was about to cry. And now, Marcus continued, when we need help, her own mother turns her back on us. What kind of mother does that? The kind who won't watch her daughter be destroyed by a selfish man, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. That's when Marcus crossed the line that changed everything. You bitter old woman, he screamed. You're just jealous because your daughter chose me over you. You can't stand that she loves me more than she loves her pathetic, lonely mother. Marcus, stop, Sarah said, but her voice was weak. No, I won't stop. She needs to hear this. You're a miserable old lady living in a tiny house, jealous of everyone who has bigger dreams than you do. Well, guess what, Martha? Your daughter doesn't need you anymore. She has me. I felt something snap inside me. All the years of watching this man slowly destroy my daughter's confidence, of biting my tongue when I wanted to speak up, of trying to be polite when I should have been protecting her. Get out, I said quietly. What? I said get out of my house. Marcus laughed. You can't throw us out. We have nowhere to go. That's not my problem. Mom, Sarah begged. Please think about this again. We really have nowhere else to turn. You should have thought of that before you let your husband gamble away your entire future. Marcus stepped closer to me, his face full of fury. You don't get to talk to me like that in front of my wife. This is my house, I said firmly. I'll talk to you however I want, and right now I want you to leave. We're not going anywhere, Marcus said, crossing his arms. Sarah, tell your mother we're staying. I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised to stand up for herself, to make smart choices. Instead I saw a broken person who had let her husband control her for so long that she didn't remember how to fight back. Sarah, I said softly, please ask your husband to leave my home. She looked between us, her face showing pain. Mom, please just let us stay for a few nights while we figure something out. No. That's when Marcus lost whatever control he had left. Fine, he screamed. You want to be a selfish, heartless witch. Then we'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of mother you are. He stormed toward my front door, pulling it open so hard it hit the wall. My neighbors, Mrs. Garcia from next door and the Wilson family from across the street, were outside working in their yards. They looked up at the noise. You want to know what kind of woman Martha Rodriguez really is? Marcus shouted, his voice carrying across the quiet neighborhood. She's throwing her own daughter out on the street, her own flesh and blood. I felt my cheeks burn with shame as neighbors stopped what they were doing to watch the drama happening on my front steps. Marcus, please, Sarah said, finally showing some backbone. But it was too late. No, he screamed. Let them all know. This woman raised a daughter who worked her whole life to buy a beautiful home. And when times got difficult, when we needed help, She slammed the door in our faces. Mrs. Garcia took a step closer, clearly trying to hear every word. "We asked for temporary help," Marcus continued, fake tears now streaming down his face. "Just a place to stay while we got back on our feet. And this heartless woman said no to her own child." I stood in my doorway watching this performance, feeling more humiliated than I had in years. My quiet street, where I'd lived for 20 years, where my neighbors respected me, was now witness to this spectacle. "That's enough," I said, stepping out onto my front steps. "No, it's not enough," Marcus turned around to face me. "You think you're so much better than everyone else, but you're just a selfish old woman who can't stand to see other people succeed. Marcus, stop this right now." "Why?" "Because you're embarrassed." "You should be embarrassed." That's when he did something that changed everything forever. In front of my neighbors, in front of God and everyone, Marcus Rodriguez raised his hand and slapped me hard across the face. The sound echoed across the quiet street like a gunshot. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my cheek, more from shock than pain. For a moment nobody moved. Even Marcus seemed surprised by what he'd done. Mrs. Garcia gasped out loud. The Wilsons' teenage daughter, who had been washing their car, dropped her sponge and stared. I looked at my daughter, waiting for her to defend me, to show some outrage that her husband had just hit her mother. Instead, Sarah stood there looking confused and scared. "Did you just hit me?" I asked quietly, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Marcus lifted his chin. "You deserved it. Throwing your own family out on the street like common trash." I looked around at my neighbors, all of them witnessing this humiliation. Mrs. Garcia looked horrified. The Wilson family was whispering to each other. Even the mail carrier had stopped his truck to watch. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "your husband just hit me in front of the entire neighborhood." She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. "And you're going to stand there and let him?" "Mom, he's just upset. He didn't mean to hit me in the face." Marcus stepped between us. "Don't try to make this about you being a victim, Martha. You brought this on yourself." I stared at this man who had just humiliated me in front of my neighbors, who had convinced my daughter to throw away her financial future, and who was now trying to make me the bad person in his twisted story. "Get off my property," I said quietly. "Make me," Marcus sneered. I looked at my daughter one last time, hoping to see some sign that she would stand up to him, that she would choose right over wrong. Instead, I saw a woman who had been so completely controlled that she couldn't even defend her own mother from being hit. "You have 5 minutes to get your bags and get off my property," I said. "If you're not gone by then, I'm calling the police." "You wouldn't dare," Marcus said, but I could see fear starting to show in his eyes. I pulled my cell phone from my pocket and dialed 911. As the phone rang, I watched Marcus's face change from defiance to panic. He grabbed Sarah's arm. "Tell your mother to hang up that phone right now," he hissed. But I was already talking to the operator, giving my address, explaining that I needed an officer to help remove violent people from my property. When I hung up, Marcus was staring at me in disbelief. "You actually called the police on your own daughter?" "No," I said calmly. "I called the police on the man who just hit me in front of witnesses." For the first time since I'd known him, Marcus Rodriguez looked genuinely afraid. The police arrived within 15 minutes, though it felt like forever. Officer Davis was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a professional manner that immediately made me feel safer. Officer Johnson, his partner, was younger, maybe in her early 30s, with the alert look of someone who took domestic violence seriously. By the time they arrived, Marcus had managed to calm himself down somewhat. He'd stopped yelling and fixed his hair, but I could see the panic still in his eyes. Sarah stood beside their luggage, looking like she wanted to disappear. "Ma'am," Officer Davis said, approaching me first. "We received a call about an assault." "Yes," I said, pointing to my still stinging cheek. "This man hit me." Officer Johnson looked at Marcus. Is this true, sir? She was being unreasonable, Marcus said, as if that made hitting someone okay. We just needed a place to stay temporarily, and she threw us out like we were strangers. That doesn't give you the right to hit anyone, Officer Davis said. Firmly. Ma'am. He turned back to me. Do you want to press charges? I looked at my daughter, standing there with her head down, saying nothing to defend me. This woman I had given birth to, raised, loved unconditionally, and she couldn't even speak up when her husband hit her mother. Yes, I said quietly. I want to press charges. Marcus's face went pale. You can't be serious. Assault is a serious charge, sir, Officer Johnson said. We have multiple witnesses who saw you strike. Mrs. Rodriguez. Indeed, my neighbors were still standing in their yards, watching the scene unfold. Mrs. Garcia nodded strongly when Officer Davis looked in her direction. I saw the whole thing, Mrs. Garcia called out. He hit Martha right across the face, completely unprovoked. This is ridiculous, Marcus protested. She's my mother-in-law. This is a family dispute. Family or not, Officer Johnson said. Assault is assault. You'll need to come with us. As they led Marcus toward the patrol car, he turned back to Sarah. Don't just stand there. Do something. But Sarah seemed frozen, watching her husband being arrested on her mother's front lawn. She looked at me with something that might have been blame. Mom, did you really have to do this? Yes, I said before she could finish. I really had to. Your husband hit me in front of the entire neighborhood, and you stood there and did nothing. He's my husband and I'm your mother, but apparently that doesn't matter to you anymore. Officer Davis approached with a clipboard. Mrs. Rodriguez, we'll need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement. Can you do that this afternoon? Of course. As the police car pulled away with Marcus in the back seat, Sarah loaded her luggage back into her minivan. She moved slowly like someone in a dream. Where will you go? Asked despite everything. He shrugged. I don't know. Maybe a hotel for tonight. With what money? The question hung in the air between us. We both knew she couldn't afford a hotel for long. We both knew this was just the beginning of her problems. Sarah, I said softly, this doesn't have to be the end. If you leave him, if you admit that this whole situation is wrong, we can work through this. She looked at me with tired eyes. He's my husband, Mom. I can't just abandon him. He abandoned you the moment he gambled away your future and hit your mother. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. It's exactly that simple. She climbed into her minivan without another word and drove away, leaving me standing on my front steps, feeling more alone than I had since my husband died 10 years ago. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I gave my statement at the police station, detailing not just the assault but the entire confrontation. The officer taking my statement, Detective Martinez, was thorough and professional. Mrs. Rodriguez, she said when we were finished, I have to ask, is this the first time your son-in-law has been physically aggressive with you? Considered the question. Yes, physically, but he's been emotionally manipulative for years. Can you elaborate on that? I told her about the gradual isolation from my daughter, how Marcus always seemed to schedule their visits during times when I was busy, how he'd slowly turned Sarah against me, making her believe that her mother was too controlling and old-fashioned. I explained about their financial situation. Over $500,000, Detective Martinez said. Gone in a matter of months. He has expensive tastes and no understanding of responsibility, I said. And your daughter went along with this. He sighed. My daughter has been completely controlled by this man. She can't see what he's doing to her future, to our family. That evening, alone in my house, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and really thought about my situation for the first time. Pressing charges against Marcus was just the beginning. He would be back. They would both be back. And next time they might not be so obvious about their demands. I thought about the house on Cedar Avenue, the one I'd helped them improve. $35,000 from my retirement savings. Money I'd worked decades to save. Money that had essentially been thrown away along with the rest of their equity. But then I remembered something. When they'd bought the house, there had been paperwork, lots of paperwork. And because I'd contributed such a significant amount for improvements, the contractor had insisted on certain protections. I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out the folder labeled Sarah House Improvements. Inside were copies of all the receipts from the work we'd done, including something I'd nearly forgotten about. A contract. The contractor had insisted on it when I'd given them the $35,000. Mrs. Rodriguez, he'd said at the time, I strongly recommend that this be structured as a home improvement loan rather than a gift. It protects your interests and ensures that your daughter understands the value of your contribution. At the time I'd hesitated. I didn't want it to be a loan. I wanted to help my daughter. But Sarah herself had insisted. Mom, I want to pay you back. This should be official. The contract was clear. $35,000 to be repaid at 4% annual interest with payments beginning 6 months after the completion of the improvements. The loan was secured by the improvements themselves, meaning I had a legal interest in the value added to the house. But they'd sold the house without paying me back, without even mentioning the outstanding loan. I picked up my phone and called the number for David Chen, the attorney who'd handled my husband's estate. His secretary told me he could see me the next morning. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking about Sarah as a little girl, how she used to help me in the kitchen, how proud she'd been when she graduated college, how excited she'd been when she bought her first house. Where had that girl gone? How had she become this woman who stood silent while her husband hit her mother? The next morning I dressed carefully in my best dress and drove to David Chen's office. He was a calm man in his 50s with gray hair and the kind of presence that made people feel safe. Mrs. Rodriguez, he said, shaking my hand warmly. I was sorry to hear about your troubles. Please sit down and tell me what's happened. I explained the entire situation. The house sale, the wasted money, the assault, the arrest. David listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me carefully. Martha, he said, do you understand that you have significant legal rights here? What do you mean? The improvement contract securing your $35,000 loan was recorded as a lien against the property. When your daughter and son-in-law sold the house without satisfying that debt, they violated the terms of the contract. You have grounds for both breach of contract and conversion. I felt something flutter in my chest. Not quite hope, but something stronger than resignation. What does that mean in practical terms? It means you can sue for the full amount of the loan plus interest plus damages. And because the debt was secured by real property, you may be able to attach other assets to satisfy the judgment. What other assets? David smiled grimly. Well, let's see what your daughter and son-in-law have left after their spending spree. Over the next hour, David explained my options in detail. I could file a civil lawsuit seeking repayment of the loan, plus interest and damages. I could also pursue criminal charges for theft by conversion since they'd sold property that was partially mine without my consent. But David, I said, I don't want to destroy my daughter's life. I just want her to understand that actions have consequences. Sometimes, Martha, he said, the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their choices. I thought about that as I drove home. Was I protecting Sarah by allowing Marcus to control her? Was I enabling her poor decisions by always being there to catch her when she fell? By the time I got home, I'd made my decision. I called David Chen and told him to file the lawsuit, not just against Marcus, but against both of them. They were married. They'd made the decision together to sell the house, and they would face the consequences together. Then I did something else. I called a locksmith and had all my locks changed. I installed a security system with cameras that would record anyone who approached my property. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. That afternoon, Sarah called. Mom, Marcus made bail. We need to talk. No, we don't. Mom, please. He's sorry about hitting you. He was just frustrated. Sarah, your husband stole $35,000 from me and then hit me when I refused to house you both after you wasted over $500,000. There's nothing to talk about. What do you mean stole $35,000? I explained about the improvement contract, about the lien on the house, about the lawsuit I'd filed that morning. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. Mom, she finally said, her voice shaking. You can't sue us. We're family. You're right, Sarah. We are family. Which is why what you did hurt so much worse than if a stranger had stolen from me. We didn't steal from you. You sold a house that had a $35,000 lien on it without paying me back. What would you call that? Another long silence. How much are you suing for? $35,000 plus 4 years of interest plus legal fees plus damages for conversion and breach of contract. My attorney estimates the total at around $50,000. We don't have $50,000. You should have thought of that before you let your husband gamble away your entire future. Mom, please. Can't we work something out? Maybe we can pay you back slowly. Over time. You mean like the original contract said? The one you ignored for 4 years before selling the house. I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the phone. Where are you staying? Asked. A cheap motel. The cheapest one we could find. How long can you afford to stay there? Maybe a few days, a week if we're very careful. And then what? I don't know, Mom. I really don't know. For a moment I almost gave in. This was my daughter, my baby. And she sounded so lost and frightened. But then I remembered Marcus's hand hitting my face, and my resolve strengthened. Sarah, I love you. I've always loved you and I always will. But I will not be stolen from, manipulated or hit. If you want a relationship with me, you need to take responsibility for your choices and the consequences that come with them. What does that mean? It means you need to decide what's more important to you. Your relationship with your husband or your relationship with your mother, because right now you can't have both. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. Outside, the sun was setting over my quiet neighborhood. Mrs. Garcia was watering her flowers, and the Wilson kids were riding their bicycles in their driveway. Everything looked normal, peaceful, but I knew that nothing would ever be normal again. Tomorrow Sarah and Marcus would receive the legal papers. They would realize that their actions had real consequences, and I would find out once and for all whether the daughter I'd raised still existed somewhere inside the woman Marcus had created. 3 days after I filed the lawsuit, David Chen called me with news that made my heart sink. Martha, I need you to sit down, he said. My investigator has been looking into your son-in-law's background, and we've uncovered some things you need to know. I was already sitting at my kitchen table, but I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of things? Marcus has a pattern of this behavior. Before he married your daughter, he was in relationships with 2 other women. Both relationships ended when the women discovered he'd been using their money for gambling and personal expenses. In one case, he convinced a woman to take out a $40,000 loan for his business ventures before disappearing. My heart sank. Does Sarah know this? I don't think so. He's very good at hiding his past. But there's more. The food truck business he invested in. It doesn't exist. My investigator couldn't find any permits, any equipment purchases, any evidence that this food truck is anything more than a way for him to justify spending $100,000. Felt sick. So the money is just gone. It appears so. And Martha, there's something else, something worse. I braced myself. He's been having secret relationships with other women throughout his marriage to your daughter. The investigator found evidence of multiple affairs, dating profiles, and money spent on these relationships. The room spun around me. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. My daughter, my sweet, trusting daughter, had been completely betrayed by a man who was using her as a bank account while cheating on her with multiple women. Does my daughter know about the affairs? I don't believe so. But Martha, the women he's been seeing, he's been promising them money and gifts. That's where more of your daughter's house money went, funding his affairs. I closed my eyes, processing this information. Everything made sense now. The sudden urgency to sell the house, the reckless spending spree, the desperation when I refused to let them stay with me. Marcus wasn't just irresponsible with money. He was a predator who had systematically destroyed my daughter's life to fund his gambling and affairs. What do we do with this information? Yes, we use it. In the lawsuit, we can argue that the money was obtained through fraud and deception. We can also use it to ensure your daughter understands exactly who she married. That afternoon, the process server delivered the legal papers to the motel where Sarah and Marcus were staying. I knew because Sarah called me 30 minutes later, her voice shaking with confusion. Mom, what is this? It's a lawsuit, Sarah. I told you I was going to file it. $52,000. You're suing us for $52,000. That's what you owe me, plus interest, plus legal fees, plus damages. We don't have $52,000. I know. That's what happens when you let someone steal from family to fund a lifestyle you can't afford. I could hear Marcus in the background yelling something I couldn't quite make out. He wants to know if you've lost your mind, Sarah said. Tell your husband that I'm completely sane. I'm also completely done being stolen from and hit. Mom, please. Can't we work something out? Maybe we can settle this. No, Sarah. The time for working things out was 4 years ago when you first missed a payment on the contract. Or it was 6 months ago when you decided to sell the house. Or it was last week when you showed up at my door, asking for help after wasting over $500,000. The time for working things out has passed. What do you want us to do? We're living in a motel. I want you to get jobs and start taking responsibility for the mess you've made. Marcus says he can't work just any job. He has standards. Then it's time for him to lower his standards. People with no money don't get to have standards about work. More yelling in the background. Then Sarah came back on the line. He says he'll countersue. For harassment or something. I almost laughed. Let him try. I have witnesses to him hitting me. And I have documentation of every dollar he stole. What does he have? More screaming in the background. Then Sarah came back on the line. He wants to know why you're doing this to us. Because you both need to learn that actions have consequences. And Sarah, there's something else you need to know about your husband. What? I hesitated. This was the moment of truth. The moment when I would either save my daughter or lose her forever. He's been cheating on you. With multiple women. Throughout your entire marriage. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. What did you say? Marcus has been having affairs for years. Multiple affairs. He's been using your money to pay for dates, gifts, and hotels with other women. That's not true. It is true. My attorney hired an investigator. We have proof. You hired an investigator to spy on my husband. I hired an investigator to find out where $500,000 went. The affairs were just what we discovered in the process. More silence. Then in the background I heard Marcus's voice clearly for the first time. What is she saying? What lies is she telling you about me? She says you're cheating on me, Sarah said, her voice hollow. The explosion that followed was audible even through the phone. Marcus screamed denials, accusations, threats. He called me every name he could think of and a few I'd never heard before. Sarah, I said quietly. Ask him about Jessica Thompson. The screaming stopped suddenly. Who is Jessica Thompson? Sarah asked. Ask your husband. I heard muffled conversation. Then Sarah came back on the line. He says he doesn't know anyone by that name. She's 28 years old, works at the bank downtown, drives a red Honda. He's been taking her to expensive restaurants and buying her jewelry for 6 months. He told her he was getting divorced. The phone went quiet again. This time the silence stretched for almost a full minute. Sarah, are you there? How do you know all this? Because I hired professionals to find out where your money went. And what we discovered is that your husband has been systematically destroying your life to fund gambling, affairs, and fake business ventures. He's saying it's not true. Of course he is. What did you expect him to say? He's crying now. He's manipulating you again. Mom, I can't handle this. I need to think. Think about this, Sarah. Think about how he convinced you to sell your house without discussing it with anyone else first. Think about how he spent $500,000 in a few months while you were at work, trusting him to make good decisions. Think about how he hit your mother in front of the entire neighborhood and then expected you to defend him. I'm hanging up now, Sarah. Wait. But the line went dead. I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone, wondering if I just saved my daughter or lost her forever. Either way, I'd told her the truth. What she did with that information was up to her. The next morning, David Chen called again. Martha, I have an update. Your daughter called my office this morning. She wants to meet. Meet about what? She didn't say specifically, but she sounded different. Shaken maybe or awakened. It's hard to tell. We arranged to meet at David's office that afternoon. I arrived early, nervous about seeing Sarah again. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. She'd always been thin, but now she looked fragile. Her clothes hung loosely on her frame, and there were dark circles under her eyes that made her look much older than her 32 years. Hello, Mom, she said quietly, taking the chair across from me. Hello, Sarah. David sat behind his desk, legal pad ready. Sarah, you said you wanted to discuss the lawsuit. I want to know exactly what my husband has done, Sarah said. I want to see all the evidence. For the next hour, David laid out everything his investigator had discovered. The affairs with multiple women, documented through hotel receipts and credit card statements. The fake food truck investment that was nothing more than a way to justify spending money on gambling and personal expenses. The pattern of financial deception with previous girlfriends. The mounting gambling debts that Sarah hadn't known about. With each revelation, I watched my daughter shrink further into her chair. By the time David finished, Sarah was staring at her hands, silent tears streaming down her face. Where is he now? Asked gently. At the motel. He doesn't know I'm here. What are you going to do? Sarah looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I don't know, Mom. I honestly don't know. My whole life, everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about my husband, it's all been a lie. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I truly am. He's been stealing from me for years. Not just spending money. Actively deceiving me, lying to me, cheating on me. And when you tried to warn me, I chose him over you. You were manipulated by someone who's very good at manipulation. It's not your fault, isn't it? I'm 32 years old, Mom. I should have seen the signs. I should have questioned why he never wanted to work steady jobs, why he always needed more money, why he was so eager to sell the house. David cleared his throat. Sarah, the question now is what you want to do about the lawsuit. Your mother is entitled to the money you owe her, but we could potentially work out a payment plan if... No, Sarah interrupted. He deserves to be paid back immediately. All of it. Honey, you just said you don't have the money. I'll get it. I'll take out a loan, work extra hours, sell whatever I need to sell. Mom, you've been trying to protect me my whole life. And I repaid you by letting my husband steal from you and hit you. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I won't fight the lawsuit. You deserve every penny. I felt my own eyes filling with tears. And Mom, I want you to know that I'm filing for divorce. Today. I can't stay married to someone who's been lying to me about everything. The relief I felt was overwhelming. What about Marcus? What will he do? Sarah's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. That's not my problem anymore. He's an adult who made his own choices. Let him figure out how to live with the consequences. As we left David's office, Sarah and I walked to our cars together. In my car, she stopped and turned to me. Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. No. I've hurt you in ways that might not be fixable, but I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. I reached out and touched her cheek the way I used to when she was little and needed comfort. You already are making it right, sweetheart. You already are. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not just hope that I'd get my money back, but hope that I'd gotten my daughter back too. But I also knew that Marcus wouldn't go quietly. A man who'd spent years manipulating and deceiving wouldn't just accept defeat. He would fight back. And when he did, it would probably get very ugly. I was right to be worried. The real battle was just beginning. I should have known Marcus wouldn't accept defeat gracefully. 3 days after Sarah filed for divorce, he showed up at my house at 5:30 in the morning, banging on my door like a crazy person. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing on my porch in yesterday's clothes, his hair messy, his eyes wild. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Martha! He screamed loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. I know you're in there. Open this door right now. I didn't move. My new security system was recording everything, and I had no intention of letting him into my house. You destroyed my marriage, he continued screaming. You turned my wife against me with your lies. Mrs. Garcia's porch light came on next door. The Wilsons' dog started barking. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police again if necessary. I'm not leaving until you talk to me. Marcus shrieked. You owe me that much. I pressed the intercom button on my security system. Marcus, you need to leave my property immediately, or I'm calling the police. Good. Call them. Let them hear how you destroyed an innocent man's life. Innocent. The word would have been funny if the situation weren't so scary. You have 30 seconds to get off my property, I said through the intercom. No. I'm not going anywhere until you admit what you've done. I dialed 911 and gave them my address. This is Martha Rodriguez on Pine Street. The man who hit me last week is back on my property, refusing to leave and making threats. The operator assured me officers were on their way. Marcus must have heard me talking because his banging became more frantic. You can't hide behind the police forever, Martha. Then he did something that shocked even me. He started screaming. Details about our family situation for the entire neighborhood to hear. This woman turned her own daughter against her husband, he yelled at the top of his lungs. She hired private investigators to spy on us. She's trying to steal our money. I watched through my window as more neighbors came outside to see what was happening. Some were recording with their phones. This was exactly what Marcus wanted, to humiliate me publicly, to make me look like the villain in his twisted story. She's jealous because her daughter loves me more than her. Marcus continued. She can't stand that Sarah chose me, so she's trying to destroy our marriage. The police arrived just as Marcus was starting to elaborate on our financial situation for the entertainment of anyone within a 6-block radius. Officer Davis was back, along with a female officer I didn't recognize. Sir, Officer Davis said firmly, you need to calm down and step away from the door. I'm not doing anything wrong. Marcus protested. I'm trying to talk to my mother-in-law. Mrs. Rodriguez has asked you to leave her property. You need to comply. She's destroying my family. She hired investigators to spy on me and my wife. The new officer, whose name tag read Martinez, stepped forward. Sir, what Mrs. Rodriguez does with her own money is not your concern. This is her property, and she has the right to ask you to leave. But she's lying about me. She's telling people I'm cheating on my wife. Officer Davis looked at his notepad. Sir, are you Marcus Rodriguez, the man who was arrested here last week for assault? It wasn't assault. It was barely a tap. You hit Mrs. Rodriguez in the face in front of multiple witnesses. That's assault. I watched from my window as Marcus's composure completely fell apart. He fell to his knees on my porch, crying dramatically. "Please," he begged, looking directly at my front door. "Please, Martha. I have nowhere to go. Sarah kicked me out of the motel. She's filing for divorce. I don't have any money. Please don't do this to me." For just a moment I felt a small bit of sympathy. Then I remembered the $500,000, the affairs with multiple women, the fake business investments, and my resolve strengthened. Officer Martinez helped Marcus to his feet. "Sir, you need to find somewhere else to go. If you come back here, you'll be arrested for trespassing." "Where am I supposed to go?" he wailed. "I don't have anywhere." "That's not Mrs. Rodriguez's problem," Officer Davis said firmly. "You have 5 minutes to get in your car and leave, or we're taking you in." After the police left with Marcus, I called Sarah. She answered on the first ring. "Mom, I heard. I'm so sorry. I told him to stay away from you." "Where is he staying?" "I don't know. After I filed for divorce yesterday, I told him he had to leave the motel. I couldn't afford to keep paying for both of us to stay there." "And you have no idea where he went?" "He mentioned maybe staying with one of his gambling friends, but honestly, Mom, I don't care. I'm done being responsible for his problems." I felt a surge of pride at hearing the strength in my daughter's voice. This was the Sarah I'd raised. The one who took responsibility for her actions and didn't make excuses for bad behavior. "How are you managing?" "Yes. I'm staying at a weekly motel across town. It's not fancy, but it's clean, and I can afford it while I figure out my next steps. I've been working double shifts at the bank, trying to save up money to pay you back." "Sarah, you don't have to rush." "Yes, I do. Mom, I let my husband steal from you and then stood by while he hit you. I need to make this right." That afternoon, David Chen called with an update. "Martha, we have a development. Marcus has hired an attorney. I thought he didn't have any money." "He doesn't. But apparently he's found a lawyer willing to work cheap. They're claiming that your lawsuit is harassment and that you're using the legal system to interfere in their marriage." I felt my blood pressure rise. "That's ridiculous." "I know it is, but we need to be prepared for a fight. They're also claiming that the improvement contract was invalid because your family and there was no real intention to collect on the debt." "There was absolutely an intention to collect. That's why we made it official." "I know that, and we can prove it. But Marcus's attorney is good at making bad cases sound reasonable. We need to document everything. Every interaction you've had with them. Every payment that was missed. Every attempt you made to work with them before filing suit." Over the next week, I compiled everything I could think of. Phone records showing how many times I'd called Sarah about missed payments. Emails I'd sent asking about their financial situation. Receipts showing money I'd lent them over the years for various emergencies that were never repaid. The picture that emerged was clear. I hadn't been a vindictive mother-in-law trying to destroy their marriage. I'd been a concerned parent trying to help my daughter, only to be systematically deceived and stolen from. But Marcus wasn't finished. 2 days before our court date, he showed up at my workplace. I was working part-time at a small insurance office, a job I'd taken to stay busy and supplement my pension. I was at my desk updating client files when the receptionist called back to tell me I had a visitor. "He says he's your son-in-law," Linda said. "Should I send him back?" My heart sank. "No, tell him I'm busy and can't see visitors during work hours." A few minutes later, Linda called again. "He's not leaving. He says he'll wait all day if he has to. He's making other clients nervous." I sighed and walked to the front office. Marcus was sitting in the waiting area, dressed in his most expensive clothes, looking like he was ready for a business meeting rather than whatever confrontation he had planned. "Marcus, you need to leave. This is my workplace." "I just want to talk," he said loudly enough for everyone in the office to hear. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." I could see my coworkers watching from their desks, curious about the drama unfolding in our usually quiet office. We have nothing to discuss. Please, Martha, I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you and Sarah, but I'm trying to make it right. The sincerity in his voice was so convincing that for a moment I almost believed him. Then I remembered that this was the same man who had looked me in the eye and lied about cheating, gambling, and a dozen other things. What do you want, Marcus? I want to settle the lawsuit. I want to make things right between us. Fine. Pay me the $52,000 you owe me, and I'll drop the suit. You know I don't have that kind of money. Then we have nothing to discuss. He stood up, moving closer to me. Martha, please. I made mistakes, but I don't deserve to have my life destroyed over them. You destroyed your own life when you decided to steal from family and cheat on your wife. Mask slipped for just a second, and I saw the real Marcus underneath. Cold, calculating, dangerous. Fine, he said quietly. If that's how you want to play it, then that's how we'll play it. But don't think this is over. I know things about your precious daughter that would surprise you. What kind of things? He smiled, a cruel expression that made my skin crawl. Let's just say Sarah hasn't been completely honest with you about everything either. Before I could ask what he meant, he turned and walked out of the office, leaving me standing there with a growing sense of worry. That evening, I called Sarah and told her about Marcus's visit. He said he knows things about you that would surprise me. What did he mean? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Mom, there are some things I never told you, things I'm not proud of. My heart sank. What kind of things? When Marcus and I were first married, I did some things. Some financial things that weren't completely legal. What do you mean? I helped him falsify some documents to get better loan rates. I also didn't report some cash tips on my taxes. And when we bought the house, I may have inflated some information on the mortgage application. Felt sick. Sarah, why didn't you tell me this? Because I was ashamed. And because Marcus said it was normal that everyone did things like that. But he kept copies of everything. He said it was for our records, but now I think he was keeping it as insurance in case I ever tried to leave him. Closed my eyes, understanding the full scope of what we were dealing with. Marcus wasn't just a manipulative gambler. He was a criminal who had been systematically compromising my daughter for years, creating evidence he could use to destroy her if she ever tried to escape. Sarah, you need to tell David Chen about this immediately. Mom, if this comes out, I could go to jail. I could lose my job, everything. And if you don't tell him and Marcus uses it against us in court, you'll lose everything anyway. Please. This way we can try to control how it comes out. The next morning, I sat in David Chen's office with my daughter as she confessed to her financial crimes. David listened without judgment, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. When Sarah finished, David leaned back in his chair and studied us both. This is serious, he said finally, but it's not insurmountable. The statute of limitations has passed on some of these issues, and the others can potentially be resolved through voluntary disclosure and payment of penalties. What about the lawsuit? Yes. The lawsuit just got more complicated. But Martha, I want you to understand something. Your son-in-law isn't just trying to avoid paying you back. He's trying to destroy your daughter's life as punishment for leaving him. This isn't about money anymore. This is about control. As we left David's office, I realized that the real battle was just beginning. Marcus had shown his true colors, and he was willing to destroy everyone around him rather than accept responsibility for his actions. But I wasn't the same woman who had opened her door to them a month ago. I was stronger now, angrier, and absolutely determined to protect my daughter from the monster she had married. The war was far from over, but for the first time I felt like we might actually win. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and tired. I sat behind David Chen's table, my hands folded in my lap, watching as Marcus entered with his attorney, a sharp-dressed man in his 40s who looked like he charged by the hour. Marcus had clearly spent money he didn't have on his appearance for court. His hair was perfectly styled, his face clean-shaven, and he wore a conservative navy suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. He was playing the role of the wronged son-in-law, the victim of a vindictive mother-in-law's harassment. Sarah sat beside me, looking nervous but determined. Over the past week, she'd worked with David to voluntarily disclose her financial irregularities to the appropriate authorities. It would mean paying penalties and potentially losing her current job, but it also meant Marcus couldn't use the information to destroy her. "All rise," the bailiff announced as Judge Robert Kim entered. He was a man in his 50s with black hair and the kind of serious expression that suggested he'd heard every sob story in the book. Marcus's attorney, Mr. James Wong, went first. He painted a picture of a young man trapped in an impossible situation, victimized by a mother-in-law who had never accepted him and was now using the legal system to interfere in their marriage. "Your Honor," Mr. Wong said in a voice full of sympathy, "my client made some poor financial decisions, as many young people do, but Mrs. Rodriguez's response has been disproportionate and vindictive. She hired private investigators to spy on my client, encouraged her daughter to file for divorce, and is now trying to extract money from a man who has no means to pay." He made Marcus sound like an innocent victim who had maybe spent a little too much money on hobbies, rather than a man who had systematically stolen over $500,000 while cheating on his wife. When it was David's turn, he methodically laid out the facts. The $35,000 loan documented in a legally binding contract. The 4 years of missed payments despite repeated attempts to collect. The sale of the house without satisfying the lien. The assault that had been witnessed by multiple neighbors. "Your Honor," David said, "this is not a case of a vindictive mother-in-law harassing her son-in-law. This is a case of a woman who has been systematically defrauded by someone who viewed her as an easy mark." Then he did something I wasn't expecting. He called Jessica Thompson as a witness. I turned to see a young woman in a modest dress entering the courtroom, her face serious. She looked like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Under oath, Jessica confirmed the affair. She testified that Marcus had told her he was getting divorced, that he had money from investments, and that he needed someone to help him through his difficult time. He had paid for expensive dinners, vacations, and jewelry, believing he was a wealthy man going through a difficult divorce. He told me his wife was controlling and that his mother-in-law was trying to steal his inheritance, Jessica testified, not looking at Marcus. He said he needed money to fight them in court. Marcus's face had gone completely white. His attorney was frantically scribbling notes, clearly not having expected this testimony. "Did you know that Mr. Marcus Rodriguez was using money from the sale of his marital home to fund your relationship?" David asked. "No, I did not. If I had known, I never would have accepted anything from him." "And when did this relationship end?" "Last month. When I found out he was lying about being divorced and that he was using his wife's money to pay for our dates." When David finished with Jessica, Mr. Wong tried to minimize the damage. He argued that the affair was irrelevant to the financial dispute, that whatever mistakes Marcus had made in his personal life didn't negate the fact that the lawsuit was excessive. But Judge Kim looked unimpressed. When Mr. Wong sat down, the judge leaned forward and studied the paperwork in front of him. "Mr. Rodriguez," he said, addressing Marcus directly, "do you dispute that you signed the improvement contract agreeing to repay Mrs. Rodriguez $35,000? "No, Your Honor, but do you dispute that you failed to make any payments on this contract for 4 years? The circumstances were. Do you dispute that you and your wife sold the house that secured this loan without paying off the debt?" Marcus's attorney stood up. "Your Honor, my client was not personally responsible for." "Sit down, counselor. I'm asking your client direct questions." Marcus looked like he was about to cry. "Your Honor, I didn't understand the legal implications." "Mr. Rodriguez, you're 29 years old. Are you claiming you didn't understand that borrowing money meant you had to pay it back? It wasn't supposed to be a real loan. It was family money." Judge Kim's expression grew even more stern. "Mr. Rodriguez, Do you see your signature on this improvement contract? Yes, but did anyone force you to sign it? No, but then it's a real loan regardless of your family relationship. The judge then turned his attention to the assault charge. He had Mrs. Garcia testify about what she'd witnessed and the police officers who had responded to the call. When Mr. Wong tried to argue that it was just a family dispute that got out of hand, Judge Kim cut him off. Counselor, assault is assault. The relationship between the parties is irrelevant. Finally, David presented evidence of Marcus's spending patterns. The gambling debts, the affairs, the fake business investments. He showed how over $500,000 had been spent in less than 6 months with no assets to show for it. Your Honor, David said, this isn't a case of poor financial management. This is a case of systematic fraud. Mr. Marcus Rodriguez used his wife's money to fund gambling, affairs, and fake business ventures while deliberately avoiding his legal obligations to my client. When both sides had presented their cases, Judge Kim called a brief recess. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, trying to process everything I'd heard. The full scope of Marcus's deception was even worse than I'd imagined. When court resumed, Judge Kim had clearly made his decision. Mr. Marcus Rodriguez, he began, I have rarely seen such a clear-cut case of financial fraud and manipulation. You borrowed $35,000 from your wife's mother, agreed to specific repayment terms, then spent 4 years avoiding your obligations while spending over $500,000 on personal luxuries, gambling, and extramarital affairs. Marcus started crying, but Judge Kim wasn't finished. When confronted about your behavior, you physically assaulted the woman you had stolen from and attempted to manipulate the legal system to avoid the consequences of your actions. He turned to his paperwork. I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff. Mr. Marcus Rodriguez, you are ordered to pay Mrs. Martha Rodriguez the full amount of $52,000 within 30 days. If you fail to comply, I will authorize wage garnishment and asset seizure. Marcus's sobbing grew louder. Furthermore, Judge Kim continued, I am forwarding this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal fraud charges. The systematic deception and theft demonstrated in this case goes far beyond a civil matter. Mr. Wong stood up quickly. Your Honor, my client has no assets with which to pay this judgment. Then your client should have thought about that before spending over $500,000 on gambling and affairs. This court will not reward financial fraud with sympathy. As we left the courthouse, Marcus was still crying in the hallway, his attorney trying to calm him down. He looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, he hissed as I walked past. You think you've won, but this isn't over. I stopped and looked at him for what I knew would be the last time. Yes, Marcus, I said quietly. It is over. It's been over since the moment you raised your hand to me. 3 months later, I was sitting on my back porch watching the sunset over my garden when Sarah called. Mom, I have news. Marcus's gambling friend, the one who was supposed to help with the food truck, was arrested today for fraud. Really? Apparently, Marcus wasn't his only victim. He'd been running investment scams for years, taking money from people for fake business ventures. Will that help you get any of the money back? Probably not. The money's gone. But it means Marcus might be facing more criminal charges too, if they can prove he knew it was a scam. And how are you doing? Better. I found a new apartment. It's small, but it's mine. I've been working double shifts and taking classes at night to improve my job skills. Are you happy? There was a long pause. You know what, Mom? Think I am. For the first time in years, I wake up in the morning and don't have to wonder what financial disaster is waiting for me. I know exactly how much money I have, exactly what I owe, exactly what I can afford. It's freeing. What about the $52,000 you owe me? I've been making payments every month just like I promised. It'll take me a few years, but I'll pay back every penny. Sarah, you don't have to. Yes, I do. It's not just about the money, Mom. It's about showing you that I'm the woman you raised me to be. After I hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, thinking about the past few months. I gotten my money back. Well, most of it. More importantly, I'd gotten my daughter back. Marcus was facing criminal charges in 2 different states. Jessica Thompson had filed a civil suit against him for fraud. The fake business investigation had expanded into a multi-state scam case. Everyone who had participated in the deception was facing consequences. While I was sitting peacefully in my garden, surrounded by the life I'd built through honest work and careful saving, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I almost didn't read it, but something made me look. I know where you live. This isn't over. I looked at the message for a long moment, then blocked the number and deleted the text. Marcus could threaten me all he wanted from whatever jail cell or courtroom he was facing. I had cameras. I had security. I had the law on my side. And I had the unshakable knowledge that I had done the right thing. A year later, I sold my house and moved to a retirement community in Florida. It was warm and peaceful, with a garden club and a book club and neighbors who had lived full lives and appreciated simple pleasures. I bought a small condo with a view of the ocean and spent my mornings tending to my new garden and my afternoons reading by the pool. Sarah visited once a month, driving down from Georgia where she'd found steady work and genuine friends. She never mentioned Marcus, and I never asked. Some chapters in life need to be closed completely before new ones can begin. One evening, as I was watering my flowers, my neighbor Helen called over the fence. "Martha, there's someone at your door. A young woman. She looks upset." My heart skipped a beat, but when I walked around to the front of my condo, I saw it wasn't anyone I knew. It was a woman in her 20s with blonde hair and tired eyes. "Mrs. Rodriguez. My name is Amanda. I know this is strange, but I need to talk to you about Marcus." I studied her face, seeing something familiar in her features. "How do you know Marcus?" "He was my boyfriend, and he's been doing to other families what he did to yours." We sat on my small patio as Amanda told me her story. Marcus had moved to Texas after the criminal charges in Florida, using a different name and a carefully crafted sob story about being victimized by his ex-wife's family. He was engaged to another woman, spinning the same lies about needing money to fight false accusations. "I've been trying to warn people," Amanda said, "but he's very convincing. He makes everyone believe he's the victim. What do you want from me?" "Help. You're the only person who's ever successfully stood up to him and won. I need to know how you did it." I made us both tea and told Amanda everything. The investigation, the lawsuit, the importance of documenting everything and never backing down. "The key," I said finally, "is understanding that you can't save someone from their own choices. You can only protect yourself and the people you care about." Amanda stayed for dinner, and we talked until late in the evening about family manipulation and the courage it takes to do the right thing when the right thing is hard. After she left, I sat on my patio looking up at the Florida stars, thinking about the strange journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd thought my life was simple and settled. I'd had no idea that my greatest challenge and my greatest victory was still ahead of me. Sometimes the most important battles are the ones you never wanted to fight, fought against people you never wanted to hurt, in defense of principles you never thought you'd have to defend. But when those battles come, you have 2 choices: fight or surrender everything you've worked for to people who see your kindness as weakness. Chose to fight. And in fighting, I discovered that at 68 years old, I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. The flowers in my garden were blooming beautifully, their petals soft and fragrant in the ocean breeze. Like me, they had survived transplanting and were thriving in new soil. Some things, I realized, grow stronger when they're forced to put down new roots. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.